Hello, everyone. Thank you for attending tonight's meeting. We've got quite a full house this evening, so thanks all for coming along. Um, I'd like to start by doing the first item of the agenda, which is election of vice chairman. Uh, and that's the committee to select a new vice chairman. For that role, I'd like to put forward Chris Amos. Could I have a seconder, please? So all those in favour of Chris? Okay, thanks very much for that. Well, welcome aboard, Chris.
Thank you very much.
Good to have you here.
Thank you.
So I know you've been on the committee before, so
A
long time ago, so that'd be good to have a fresh pair of eyes looking at things. Yeah, thank you. The item is apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chairman. We've received no apologies for absence or substitutions.
Thank you. So third item, minutes of the last meeting. Everybody had a look at those and happy with those? Can I have a proposer and a seconder? Thank you, Peter. And thank you, Bernie. So we're happy to accept those. There was one item from that last meeting, and that was the leader kindly offered to respond to a question that was raised at that meeting. I wonder if you've had an opportunity to look at that for us.
Apologies, Chairman. I thought I'd sent that to you. I'll dig it out and send it before the end of the meeting.
Thanks very much. I may well have missed it. I don't know if any other committee members seen it or not. No, it's probably hung up in the ether somewhere.
I'll definitely dig it out. No, it's been sat here a week, so I definitely know I've done it, so I'll just make sure it's sent by the end of the night.
Okay, thanks very much for that. Item 4, declarations of interest. Peter?
Sorry, Chairman, but I find I'm living in a bit of a goldfish bowl with sound at the moment.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, Chair. Well, I can hear myself now, but
It does a bit, actually.
I'm struggling to hear properly over here, but it got very loud all of a sudden.
How about now? Okay, that's better. Thanks very much. So, the next is 5 questions on notice pursuant to Council Procedure Rule 38.
Thank you, Chairman. We've received no questions.
Okay. Is item 6, but what we discussed prior to the meeting is to take item 7 first and then 6. So I hope you're happy with that. That means that we'll have the leader's presence for a little bit longer because he's moved down the agenda. So with that, I'd like to take item 7, which is report of the Assistant Director, Housing Environment, Waste Street Cleaning Contract Implementation, which is pages 15 to 24. And the committee, having met the other day, formulated a few questions in advance, but there's not been any names put to the questions. So I don't know how the committee, would you like to go round one at a time, or how would you like to play it? Okay, there's a generally relaxed about that. Okay, would you prefer that I read them out and then you've got an opportunity to respond? Yeah, okay, the first question up on page 1. Does anyone like to ask that question? Thanks, Graham. Thanks, Chris.
Chair, can I suggest we take your proposal and if you read them out, and if anyone wants to read one specifically, they could put their hand up on that question.
Graham, you said you wanted to ask a couple. Which ones were they? Yeah.
Sorry.
Page 3.
Page 3.
Is it? Can you provide clarification?
Would
That one.
no. Would the procedure for requesting and obtaining replacement bins? Third one.
Yes, got it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll get to that one. I'm over to you. That's fine. And you said you had a second one.
Just on the waste. And what other provisions with the new contract that the appointed provider will be required to adhere to?
Which page is that on, Graham?
It's on the second one.
Second page.
Top of the.
Can't see it. What's the start with again, Graham?
It's what are the provisions within the new contract?
Yeah, got it. Okay. Question?
Right. Why, when we started this procurement, did we go out for a gold-plated service that was clearly unaffordable?
Thank you, Chairman. I think I'll take that one because Councillor Smith wasn't around when you were talking about the reference when we first started this procurement, because that was back in July 24. And as we all know, Councillor Bush was the portfolio holder at that time. So I'll read out the response that's been written and given to the Scrutiny Committee. It says, for information on the development and evolution of the service specification, please refer to the Cabinet reports from July 2024 and May 2025. That has been supplied to the committee as background information. The price of any service such as this is unknown at the outset. As this service was last procured in 2011, it was reasonable to expect higher costs, and that was covered in July 2024 Cabinet report. It is only once prices have been sought from bidders that a true indication of contract costs can be established. The competitive dialogue process used for this procurement allowed for indicative prices to be submitted by bidders prior to dialogue commencing. The dialogue process then allowed for discussion about the Council's requirements before a final service specification is agreed. The portfolio holder working party established to support the development of the contract specification was involved and therefore aware of the high standards of services included in the specification issued to bidders. The waste and recycling collection aspects of the service specification are driven by the need to be compliant with the Environment Act 2021 and collection of a wider range of recycled materials including glass from the curbside from April 2026. On the street cleaning side, a higher standard of specification was chosen in order to deliver the best possible service for our residents and visitors. This is something residents indicated when they wanted to see through the feedback to the corporate plan consultation undertaken during 2023. So that's the formal answer. I'm sure there's a follow-up question, so I'll wait for that.
Does anyone have any comments or follow-ups on that? No, I mean, this is something obviously I'd raised with you at Cabinet. Sorry.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. There's lots of questions that I could ask. There's lots of debate we could have around this because I've just seen, I've read all through the documents. I was involved with this in the earlier days, and there's lots of open and very, very vague positions we are on now with where the contract was going to be going. I mean, I don't know what time we could have this debate because I think there's some issues here that really need to be addressed. And I just think that looking at these cabinet meetings at 24, looking at all this being thrown in 25, and I look at where we are for recommendations now, we have a number of issues here. And I'm representing not just me as a councillor, but the residents of this whole district. It's the biggest contract, and we're trying to water it down here. We're trying to water it down. The importance is to the taxpayer of where this service is going to be going. I understand LGR. I understand where we're going with that. And it's a bit like, is it like get a jail-free card or a state of execution? Because there are certain elements in here in terms of cost. When we look at what the budget was that this leader presented to us earlier in the year, that said our costs on waste was about 4 million, and now it's like 7 million. I mean, there's a lot of discrepancies here, and there's a lot of issues regarding the actual contract itself. At the moment, I read through it, and it says like the contract should actually, it was noon, 12th of noon September. So where are we now? Who's going to be running it to March next year? Originally, it was going to be January and December and January when the contracts ended. We've rolled it out until that, to April. We've rolled it out to April. We don't know who the contractor's going to be. We don't know what the contract, in terms of the specification, is now defined as. This is a very, very difficult situation for me to actually interpret and present to my residents. So I think, at the end of the day, there are certain elements. I think Veolia potentially will have this contract, and I don't say it's a bad thing, but I think we've got to address like what we're going to do, because in this recommendation we're going to have to pick up in March 26. We're going to have to pick up glass every other week. We're going to have to pick up. What are we going to do about these what they call rural routes? Have black bags that only collect every week. What are they going to do about the food waste? Food waste has to be collected every week, and this is not very clear. It's very vague. So I can't support these recommendations. I need to see a bit more clarity and detail so I can go back to my residents when I go to parish meetings and say what's going to happen in March next year. How many boxes am I going to have? What am I going to do? When am I going to pick up? When is glass going to be coming from? Are my flats in my council tenants in their apartments in Little Oakley? What am I going to do? We have rural. We have black bags. We don't put food out in the box. This is just so vague, and I'm not happy about it. And how we manage that process, 11,000 homes are on this route of rural routes at the moment that actually can have black bags. How are we going to go to every single property and deal with that on a weekly basis to take food? I mean, there's so many questions to be asked on this, and this is not the environment for that. Well, I think we have to submit this to the environmental portfolio holder and the leader of this council, because I can't support this in any form at this moment with where we are. We've got no costs in where we can know we're going to go. We're actually looking at it in a way that, is it 7 million? Is it 8 million? We can't afford it, but we've got to deliver that service because that's the environmental policy, that's the legislation. And I'll tell you what, we're so far behind the curve, and I just feel a little bit embarrassed about where we are tonight with this. And that's far at this stage, that's all I want to say. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Do you want to respond to that, or do
Chairman, this is scrutiny. If you've got issues that I'm happy to raise them, if Councillor Bush decides this isn't the forum to do them, I don't know what else you'd want me to do. I mean, we have had a year and a half of this. This isn't something that suddenly sprung on you tonight. It's a year and a half where this contract has been in the making. Your work programs are your work programs. I can't sit there and put anything on your work program. It's not the Cabinet's role. You know that, as well as I do. I am happy to answer any questions I can, provided the procurement lets me. And it's unfortunate that we didn't have the Cabinet meeting a couple of weeks ago, because all that information that's bothering Councillor Bush would be out in the domain. But there is a huge amount of detail already out. That's why I refer to the July reports. That's why I refer to the May reports. That specification's there. The only things that are missing is the little details around the money and who's been awarded it. But the specification's there. And I think that's enough to go on. What is it you're scrutinising? What is it you want from me?
Peter?
Thank you, Chairman. I've just got a couple of questions really, which is the original question was, we're talking about when the procedure or the procurement started. So obviously we're all aware of local government reorganisation. So question for you is, at the time when this process started, was we aware of local government reorganisation then? Were we aware at the time of the recommendations? I'm assuming not, because they came after that, in terms of how many councils there potentially were. What impact could that potentially have, and was that in the minds of what was it? Was there any potential impact on the contract, i.e. the length, etc.? Was that part of your consideration with LGR? Was it part of the consideration? So that's the question. And did it have any impact? And moving away from that, we will see over that period of time many new houses that will be built. I'm assuming that the new houses, when they're delivered, when people move into them, that those new routes and those new houses will be worked into this contract. So if you could just reassure myself and residents that may be listening to this, that anybody moves into new houses, that they're all going to have their waste collected the first week they move in. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll start with the beginning. So for the procurement, when it first started out, LGR wasn't even on the table. Nobody knew about it, you know. And then when we got into LGR, we started talking about it, and then the contract came back to unaffordable. That was the wording that was used in the May report. And at that point, we sat there and was well aware of LGR, and we realised that we couldn't really deliver a contract that was 7, 8 years, I think was the original term, when we were going into a new unitary in 2 years' time, 3 years' time at that point. So we thought it would be better to put together a contract that wouldn't cliff edge the new unitary. So as soon as they took over, they had to do a waste contract. It takes about 2.5 years to do a contract. But at the same time, we didn't want to do an 8-year one and commit them to something that was perhaps something they didn't want. And the reason why we did that is because there is some very big differences. And I'm going to assume for a second, so maybe I'm wrong and maybe it'll be Oxford as well. But I've only worked on Braintree and Colchester. But Braintree has got an in-house service. Colchester's got an in-house service. Braintree collects every 3 weeks now, I believe. Colchester collects every 2 weeks like us. But then you've also got the added responsibilities of a new unitary who's also responsible for removing the rubbish, disposing of the rubbish. So at the moment, Tendering collects it and Essex disposes of it for us. But under a new unitary, we're responsible for both elements. And when you start adding all of that, and there's a whole host of other things, there is opportunities for cost savings on a bigger scale. So committing somebody to an 8-year contract and forcing them to do that would be irresponsible of us. Yeah. Tendering still exists when we don't. The residents still exist. And I don't want to put a new unitary in a place where it's going to be a problem for us as residents. That will be down to the new unitary councils, but I can't say and crystal ball what they're going to do. But I want to put them in the best place I possibly can. New routes, absolutely, it's all part of the contracts. That's already established. It was in the old ones. It's in the new ones. We don't wait 14 years to add people to a new contract. So, yeah, that's already in there.
Thanks, Chairman.
Peter.
I just wanted to say, I'm assuming that was the case as part of the contract, because I agree with everything you said there, in terms of you can't have a 7 or 8 year contract with the changes that seem inevitable. So I assumed that was the reason why this contract is much shorter there, and I think that I was aware of the differences as well with Colchester and Braintree as well, and having that sort of where it all dovetails together, it has to. So somebody is going to make a decision at some point in the future, and personally I think that was the sensible thing to do, is to have a shorter contract so that it fits in with the LGR as it happens and when it happens. So thank you.
And come back, Jim. Just so we're clear, we've given the new unitary 3 years to establish their own contract, and I think that was a reasonable time. If we'd gone any further, we'd have committed them to 6 years, and that sentence felt a bit too long.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, my points were around, as I raised at Cabinet, the fact that the previous administration knew this, I think the term in here is gold-plated, specification wasn't achievable. We knew it. We were told it by the officers that it wasn't achievable. I can't see why the Cabinet decided to pursue that and I'm obviously concerned about the cost that's incurred on the taxpayer. I can't remember the amount that was had to be allocated at the cabinet meeting for further advice on the next stages, but that was clearly incurred because the advice received by the cabinet wasn't listened to. And I wonder what your thoughts were on that.
Okay, thank you very much. So, I heard your comments at Cabinet about the unaffordable, so I tried digging around to see if that had been any of the advice, and Councillor Bush will know, that we never got told it was unaffordable. We got told that it was going to be increasing costs, but we already knew that. I mean, you're talking about a 7-year contract at 2018. It's going to go up in 2025. We're aware of the Environment Act, so we knew that was going to go up as well. But we were never told it was unaffordable. In fact, the very first people to tell us it was unaffordable were the people bidding on it. So what we did was we went for a gold-plated standard, platinum-plated, whatever you want to call it, because that's what residents asked for. And I think it's exploring the art of the possible. But we didn't do this alone as Cabinet. We had ELGA, who they came in, so specialists in this. They encouraged us to go down the output route, which is basically the difference in the contract, because we were looking for a response-led cleaning in all of our towns across the district, and instead of a sort of turn up at a certain time, a certain day, to empty bins, we wanted, if there was a problem within town, maybe we'd want it gone in 2 hours, 3 hours. This is trying to bring up our towns. So that was what we were led to believe by our consultants, and that was the ones from ELGA. And as I said before, that was the general gist of where we were going. Now, we got consultants in, you're absolutely right, the price you were looking for, we set aside £400,000. We haven't spent the whole £400,000, but that was to bring in ELGA, who had initial benchmarks and advice, Eunomia, who dealt with the finance of the WRM, which dealt with the spec and the performance, and Sharp Pritchard, who are the lawyers. And we brought them in because we knew we didn't have the skills. Councillor Bush raised it right in one of the first meetings. We were worried about it, weren't we, Councillor Bush? And so we recognised that there was an issue there, and that's why we got them in. Now, a lot of the work that was used by those people is used in this final contract. It wasn't wasted. The only bit that we had was when we got to what was called a what's the engagement called? Competitive dialogue. When they actually spoke to us and said, what you've asked for here could be very expensive, we said, give us a price. And they said, that's the price. And we went, that's unaffordable, £7 million more than we wanted to pay. Go back and have a look. And that is when you got the May report. That was the first time it was unaffordable. You didn't tell us it was unaffordable until May. Nobody told us it was unaffordable. So I think it's a bit unfair to say you knew it was unaffordable and never told us. You were the only people who knew it.
So, just to clarify then, officers told us but didn't tell you.
I cannot speak to what the officers told you. I can only speak to what they told us.
Okay.
Don't know how many times I have to say it. The officers told us that the cost would go up, but we knew that. You knew that. The word you've used is unaffordable. That is a word that's never been uttered.
Okay, thanks very much for that. The second question is, how many meetings of the portfolio holder working group for this procurement have there been, and what were the dates of the meetings?
Thank you. I'll take this one. So I was part of the working group. So we had 4 meetings on the 28th of September 23, 16th of November 23, 30th of May 24 and the 1st of October 24, which was the final meeting.
Does anyone have any questions on that? But I've only the one. I'm surprised that last meeting was over a year ago.
So we went into the procurement process. It was inappropriate for us to talk about it any further in the same way that even tonight, because we haven't clarified this with Cabinet, it's not been agreed. Therefore, there are certain things that are still off the table for us to talk about.
Okay, thanks very much for that. The next question is Sorry,
Yeah,
Mike.
thanks, Chairman. Yeah, I'm just listening to what Councillor Smith said. Something's off the table at the moment, but we're in November now. We originally was contracts were entering in December and January for the two separate contracts, the waste and the street cleaning. So the whole idea was to align them, and it was all going to start in January. Now we're seeing it's in April. Okay, and I've seen some of the Cabinet reports said the reasons for it being April. So for me, the question, Joseph, there is something on the table, because at this stage, we talk about months, just a few months away, we've got to mobilise, or we either the existing contractor or a new contractor that's got to actually mobilise and deliver the service to all these homes in our district. And not only district, in terms of the existing service, the new service, the glass, and all of that associated with it, the alternative weeks. So there is massive management and process that needs to be dealt with to set this up. Okay, we're talking about 3 or 4 months, and it takes a long time, especially with the trained contractors, to actually get vehicles on the road, get them to understand it. We already realise that our management service or our management support in the past, is now beyond the curve and where we need to be in terms of picking up boxes, recording it, to become more efficient as a council. So we've got all of that to deal with in a very short space of time. And I'm sitting here listening that we've still got everything off the table, and I just can't see how we can appoint a new contractor and not extend an existing contractor. And I just want to be open and honest and transparent that actually probably the best vehicle for us, I know you probably want to cut in here, just bear with me, Lisa, okay, that for me, to actually go for a new contractor set up this, to cover the whole district, in this space of time, I don't think the contractual milestones and the timescales we can deliver it, other than we're going to actually have problems on the street in terms of dealing with street cleaning and waste collection with a totally new service. Because I don't see the management that we've got here and the officers' resource, and this is like something I've always said, that we need more resource to support the environmental services to actually make certain we deliver this service effectively and efficiently. And that don't convince me, I'm sorry. And I just need an answer to that from the environmental portfolio holder, that there is something on the table, and please be honest and open with it at this moment. Thank you.
Could Lisa respond and then Adrian?
Thank you, Chairman. And Councillor Bush, I was not going to cut across you, I was just going to try and assist in the relation to the comment about what we cannot disclose in this meeting. So this, there is a report that is being prepared for Cabinet's agenda for Cabinet meeting on the 14th of November. Yeah, so that Cabinet agenda will be published on Thursday. So there is information that the members, the Cabinet members and officers' support can provide you with regards to reassurance on the questions you're asking. There's 2 bits of information that we can't put into the public domain at this point, and that is who would be the proposed contractor and the final amount of money. So that at the moment. But if it would assist, I am aware that, and I think what we've done tonight is we've got the report that's before you, and also then as a committee you've gone into your questions. I am aware that the portfolio holder for environment has got a summary of where we're at as of today, and I just wonder if it would be helpful for the committee to hear some of that information, because it could be that it answers some of your questions, but it wasn't available obviously when the report for the committee was published. So I just think that it's just a bit of a recap of where we've been and where we're at now, and I do think it might help with some of your questions.
Adrian?
Yeah, I'm happy to read this out. And in fact, the whole thing has taken a bit of an odd turn. If I thought I would get to present this to start with, if I'm honest, so it would have given you a little bit more clarity. So basically, the meeting is held in public. The council is still within the procurement process. So until a decision is made by cabinet, the council is unable to reveal, as Lisa said, the certain things into the public domain. At its meeting on the 26th of July, Cabinet agreed to the commencement of a procurement process to appoint a contractor to deliver the Council's waste and recycling collection and street cleaning service from 2026 onwards, based upon a set of principles which translated into a specification for detailed solutions to be submitted against. The Council's project team has been supported throughout the procurement process by 4 external organisations chosen for their experience in supporting similar procurements elsewhere. The price for the initial detailed solutions provided by bidders at the invitation to submit detailed solutions was not affordable by the Council, being potentially over £7 million per annum above the current associated budgets. In response to the affordability position and devolution and local government reorganisation proposals for Greater Essex, at its meeting on the 23rd of May 2025, Cabinet agreed a revised set of core specification principles aimed at reducing the price at final tender stage. The changes were a shorter contract from 8 to an initial 3-year contract term with an optional 2-year extension period, a reduction in specification, mainly in relation to street cleaning, aimed at reducing the level of risk and uncertainty while increasing affordability, but not offering a lower level of service than currently, in particular continuing a fortnightly collection of residual waste. That the Council does not take any risk on the value of the dry mixed recycling collected at the curbside, and that the Council does not fund the upfront purchase of any vehicle fleet. Within the main Cabinet report, set out the complete set of core specifications. There was a revised draft specification was sent to bidders following the May 2025 Cabinet meeting, and officers entered competitive dialogue discussions with each individual bidder during June and July 2025. After which the Council's requirements were finalised via a decision by the Corporate Director for Operations and delivery on the 14th of August 2025, and final detailed solutions tenders were invited with a tender closing date of the 17th of September 2025. The terms and conditions of the expected contract requirements form part of the procurement process. Some clarification questions received related to the service specification, but none that fundamentally alter the specification or contract terms. Therefore, subject to the recommendations being approved by Cabinet, no further decisions are required for the contract documentation to be completed. The Council has undertaken its tender evaluation process, ensuring there is full compliance with the requirements of the service specification. The price must also be within a range that is affordable to the Council over the initial contract duration of 3 years, subject to budget adjustments. The Council will require an additional budget in order to pay for the service, taking into account one-off grant funding received by the Council. In anticipation of increased contract costs, £2.417 million has already been set aside as part of finalising the outturn position for 24-25. Further monies are being identified that can be freed up by refocusing budgets. The details will be contained within the Cabinet report, but reassurances can be given that the price is affordable to the Council. Prior to Cabinet approving the award of the contract, the financial implications to the Council needs to be considered and balanced against compliance with the statutory duties regarding waste and recycling collection. Refocusing of existing budgets in order to continue providing the statutorily required waste service may impact the speed and scale of investment elsewhere within the Council's overall budget. It is planned to develop a fully funded 2-year financial work programme budget that will enable the Council to fully support and protect frontline services. In order to ensure an effective delivery of the new contract and a smooth transition to the new recycling collection services, officers will be developing an implementation and communications plan that will be jointly developed with the successful bidder who, as part of their tender submission, were required to submit a comprehensive mobilisation plan. Overall, the new contract, as specified, will provide residents of and visitors to the district a level of street cleaning that is at least the equivalent to that provided currently, and all residents will receive an enhanced recycling service alongside the continuation of fortnightly or weekly residual waste collection. I can go on and explain in advance the difference in the new contract, if that is helpful now, or would you rather come up for that later on?
I think it is one of the future questions that we discussed. Was is it the next one up? I think, isn't it? Yeah. Can you provide clarification on the distinctions between the 3 contract versions? The current contract in operation, the enhanced version incorporating additional features, and the newly proposed contract. So I know the first line is not entirely clear. So what I think members were looking at was the contract that we've had for the last period, the contract that's in place, and rather than break it down into, oh, this part was provided by X and this part was provided by Y, it was the service, overall service that's being provided through whatever source. The next part was the service that's now being proposed, and then obviously the other part was what someone has come up with the phrase gold-plated, what that service. So it was the differences between the 3. But before you do, there's just one thing that popped into my mind, Adrian. You said that obviously that the working group finished in October, and that was because it went out to procurement. Could I ask when the specification, the date the specification was finalised before it went out to procurement? Damien.
Thank you, Chairman. I think it depends at what stage you mean, because this is quite a different process, the new procurement system, to the historical one that we've had the 14 years worth of. So there were dialogue elements in it that led up to the discussion that said, well, actually, this is going to cost you 7 million extra, so therefore we need to look at it again. So when you say at the point the specification went out for tender, is it where we got to where we now have a specification that has been fully costed and we're putting forward, or is it at the point where we were at a dialogue discussion? Because there are different dates when different things happened.
I think what I'm trying to get at is the point at which the working group were no longer feeding in. So changes or decisions were made that excluded that working group. Because although I wasn't part of the working group, I know that the people who sat on there were interested. That's why they put their name forward. They were keen to be involved and have input. So what I'm getting at is what changes, I suppose, were changes made after they were no longer involved, so the working group took no further part. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, so up until the October 24, everything was going exactly as was already discussed. What changed is that the contract specification changed, but we weren't able to have a... okay.
So the first three working parties, Councillor Bush chaired, and you know, I know we have differences, but Councillor Bush did an excellent job. I'll put that on record. Yeah, and most of the work was done by Councillor Bush right up until he wasn't on the cabinet anymore. And then the fourth one was the scheduled final one. So the previous meeting, they'd all decided that they would just wrap it up in October. So that the working party itself wrapped itself up, you know, because it achieved its job at that point. And that was decided that we'd have one more in October, which I attended because Councillor Smith was new into the job, and I felt there needed to be a bit of oversight. I'd already been discussing with Councillor Bush for the last year, so how long it feels like. And it came to its natural conclusion. I think that's the bit. And then there was nothing else. That it was then about putting it into the dialogue, competitive dialogue, having those conversations. That started the procurement as such to a point where members couldn't really discuss it. Yeah, so when we were bringing it back to the working group, which by the way, two of them were put onto the cabinet, so Councillor Scott and Councillor Smith were part of the working group and then became the cabinet. You've already said by yourself that you weren't attending. It was poorly attended at the end. You know, when I remember the last one, there was only 3, maybe 4 of us in the room. You know, and Councillor Smith was one of them. So, yeah, there was no reason to convene another one because it was in the procurement period now. You know, there wasn't any extra information we could give people apart from what came at May.
Okay, Lisa, did you want to comment?
I think the question was answered in the fact that I've just double checked on the decisions that are in the cabinet reports, and the working group met up to October 24 when the high level specification was given. The working group gave feedback on the high level specification, and then the specification goes out, but as Mr. Williams has highlighted, then it's a staged process. So you don't go out with a specification at that stage and you get a bid back straight away. What you know, go through the dialogue process. I think it's fair to say that prior to the May cabinet report, the working group didn't meet again, but I think that the May report is very, very specific in its detail, which sets out what options were left available to the council, which was very limited. And the changes to the core specification were highlighted in that cabinet report. So the majority of the specification was still the same, apart from 3 or 4 changes, which were shorter contract term, that picks up the LGR point, a reduction in specification, and that was in relation to obviously affordability, not to take any risk on the dry mixed recycling and curbside, and not to fund upfront any purchase of the vehicle fleet. So they were the 4 changes that were made to the specification at that point.
Okay, thanks very much for that. Jumping back to the next question then, sorry about that, it just popped into my head when I looked down, was the question around the 3 different, Peter.
Thank you, Chair. Couple of questions. Have we used consultants in this process? If we have, how much have the consultants cost? What's the likely total cost of consultant? What will it be at the end of this process? If we have used consultants, what expertise have they brought in that we haven't got internally? That's a point there. Also, Councillor Smith said about the vehicles there. Can you just clarify that we are not going to purchase these vehicles, or we are going to purchase these vehicles? And I might have some supplementary questions about that, depending on what you say. Thank you.
You take the I'll do the vehicles first. We're not going to be purchasing the vehicles. No.
Consultants, yes, we did use consultants. So in order to avoid backwards and forwards with decision making and cabinets and everything else, We earmarked originally £300,000 as a pot to help with the getting consultants help, professional help, and that sort of thing. Sort of a little while along, we thought maybe that's not enough, so we threw an extra 100,000 in. The decisions are out there through our budget process. Those consultants, I'm happy to send these separately if you want them, were Elga. As you heard me, they helped us with the initial benchmarking and the advice. Eunomia, who helped us with all the finance elements of it. WRM, who helped us with the spec and the performance. And Sharp Pritchard, who were our lawyer specific to waste. So, and they have been good value. I'm not sure if I can tell you how much you spent yet, because that's in the cabinet report. You wait 2 days, it'll be there. But yes, we didn't spend it all.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that.
I know we've been talking about the contract in its sort of like outline and a bit of detail. A bit I want to talk now is to bring back it to actually on the ground of what happens to our residents, okay, in this new service. Because I've got to read through this document and we've got 11,000 homes that's on the weekly. And I need to get some clarification on the weekly refuse, which is a black bag that don't have to put food in it, don't have to put glass in it, but they could put everything in it and bin it, okay? But the legislation in March leads us to weekly green boxes to put food in and a red box to put glass in, alternatively. And I just want to see how we're going to administer this, because we've got the red box, as we all know, 1 week, and this is my understanding, maybe I'm wrong, but the red box in the future is going to be cardboard and paper 1 week and glass the following week, and fortnightly for the plastics. And I know it's a bit like pedantics, because how are we going to deal with that in flats? Because these people need to have this communication. One is decision, and that's the next question I was going to ask. 14th of November, Cabinet make the decision, who we're using, what we're using, how we're using it, what the spec is, and what we're going to be delivering. How we communicate that out to the real world for everybody in the whole of this district is a very, very important point. I know it's going to be a few months before the new service will kick in, but we need to make them very aware, because it's a difficult thing. We all struggle with it sometimes, is what we put in that box, what do we put in that box. So they're going from a black bag, everything's thrown in it, and now we're going to be going into this new world. Now, I don't know how we're going to explain that, and how we're even going to manage it to actually get whoever the successful contractor is to go up 4 flights of stairs every week to pick up a green box. And I just like you to understand how that is built into the spec, how we built into them costs, because this is significant costs and a significant process of how we deliver and how we remove waste, and to do recycling, the food waste, and all of the other aspects. I had this conversation for over 2 years back when I was in the cabinet, and it's just like this is the practicality of how we do it, and the massive implications in processes and management of this. And I will come back to it, because I can just see if we don't get this right from the outset, and I understand we spent like nearly £500,000 in actually having consultants and dealing with it to help our management process and to go where we're going with the contracts. But we really need to get an handle on this, because the clock is ticking. We're going to be December next month, and in 3 months we're going to be having this new contract that's rolling out. And do you know what? This whole district, we're going like, what am I going to be doing? So I just need to get some comfort and some sort of assurances how we're going to communicate that with this new contract after the 14th of November to the outside world. That's my question.
Damien.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Bush. So, reassurance, yes, of course. We've given it some considerable thought, and it is all built into the proposed new contract. So, we won't change our collection schedules from where they are now. To be compliant with the Environment Act, we will, of course, be collecting plastics and glass from the doorstep, and we will also, pretty much from day one, be looking at the rural areas to collect food as well. Flats are a more complicated issue, a much more complicated issue, because those flats, you won't be collecting flats from individual flats. You'll be looking to collect from a communal area. And to be compliant with the Environment Act, we will offer that service, but we will have to talk to each block, because they could well have managing agents, they could be doing things themselves as all of the owners within the blocks of flats about how that is going to happen. So that in itself will take some time to do, and that is something that we will do moving forward through the first 6 months of that contract and through the remaining elements of that contract. So we have thought about it. There will be a communications plan, and John and others of his team are working on that with the contractor, so that none of this is just going to be sprung on people. It will all be sent out to people. We'll do our usual thing about how we collect, where we collect, when we collect, and all those things we've looked at once the contract is placed, so that we can work with the contractor to achieve that. So as reassurance, it's not been left to chance. It is most definitely going to be planned, and you'll see more of that come out when you read the Cabinet report in a couple of days' time. But I can give you that reassurance. It is not being left to chance. It will be planned, and it will be planned to the nth degree.
Okay, thanks for that. We'll try again. The difference between the three, please.
So I'm assuming I don't have to explain the current contract. So
Well, it's just for anyone listening in or the recording, the difference between the three, that's all.
well, the main difference is what we're offering on the new proposed contract. So it's the other one was going to be more performance based, which meant that they were literally they would be emptying litter bins on the street cleaning contract. Almost, we would have that set up so that they were just going out and making sure that they were emptied all the time. That's an unaffordable part of it. So what we're going to do is revert back to what we currently have. So I'm quite happy to read out the differences now that you're going to be finding in the new one. So there's going to be one single contract, which is what we agreed for both street cleaning and waste and recycling. The performance standards, performance management framework built in with ability to hold the contractor to account. The council will provide customer contact centre and handle all the queries, complaints as we currently do. The option for TDC to be provided with access to live vehicle data in order to facilitate more effective performance monitoring. So we will have a better idea of where the vehicles are. That's new. 3-year initial contract term with an optional 2-year extension period. An annual formal review mechanism built in to more readily facilitate changes or efficiency improvements with a quarterly performance review meetings via a waste contract board. The contractor will fund the upfront purchase of the vehicle fleet. The chargeable bulky item collection service will be included, administered by the contractor. The Fowler Road depot will still be made available to the contractor on a lease at no charge as it is currently. The inclusion of container delivery teams specific to garden waste service and container delivery as we currently have. The waste and recycling collection service will still have the fortnightly residual waste collection from wheel bins. The recycling collection will be compliant with the Environment Act 2021, which will give twin stream alternate weekly with containers including glass 1 week and fibres, paper and cardboard the other. Boxes to be used for presentation of the material. The weekly food waste collection for all residents including flats and rural restricted properties. The chargeable garden waste collection service available to all residents as part of the core contract with no change to collection frequency or subscription costs. And the contractor will take 100% of the risk on the dry recyclable material value. The street cleaning service will be frequency based as we have now with set bin cleaning and bin emptying schedules. The option for provision of a mobile response team. The inclusion of new beach cleans which will be at Holland-on-Sea, which will be added into the contract. There will be additional seafront bins above the current numbers, the blue bins, to support frequency based during the summer period. And the summer period will be extended from March, beginning of March to end of September in each year of the contract. Those are the differences for the new one.
Thanks for that. I think Peter's got a question, but before I do, I think you mentioned it in there, but I was trying to take everything in as you listed it. The frequency in each individual road stays the same.
Yes.
So if a road gets 2 sweeps, now it will get there. And if it gets 1 sweep a week, somewhere else it will get 1 sweep a week. And so all those stay the same.
Yes.
Okay, thanks for that. Peter.
Thank you, Chair. Does this include dog waste bins? Can you just clarify that, please?
It does currently, so it will continue to.
Right, thank you. With that in mind, then, it's one of the most complained about things I receive is about overfilled dog waste bins, and it's a problem. So can I urge whoever is looking at this contract to pay special attention to dog waste and to make sure that they're collected on time. And the other thing that we found in Wheelie, in particular, and Wheelie Heath, was that with the building of new houses, more residents, we're trying to encourage more people to get out and about, etc. There's a lot of dog walkers there. And with the new houses, the number of dog waste bins was inadequate. And it became a bit of a task, if I'm honest, to actually get new bins fitted to these new routes that people were taking. And the other thing, as well as that, the length of time that we've got to have these new bins, is that the cost of those new bins, in terms of the collection of them, is actually borne by the parish council and not by the contract, because it's an addition. So now that we know that where the houses, large developments are going to be, can we not have some sort of provision in it where the parish councils don't have to go through such pain in trying to get their dog waste bins? Otherwise we'll find more and more of these things tied to bushes, which is the alternative, I think, or gathering around the base. So dog waste, please. What's your view? Thank you.
I think that although all the bin emptying is part of the contract, so my view on it is a separate issue to the actual contract itself. So the contract, they will be emptied as they are now, with an idea of us knowing where the vehicles are at all stages.
Okay, right. Thanks. You're absolutely right. It's a pain in my life sometimes. Leader of the council gets an email about an overfilled dog bin. I think what the new contract brings is the contract management. That's the real big thing there. So it's not just going to be, did they turn up? Well, we don't know. There's going to be technology involved. We're moving with the IT of the world. We've got access to IT from their side if we want it. So if they say we've been over and emptied that bin, we can say prove it, sort of thing. And I think there's probably some more work to do around dog bins. We've got ideas, but at the moment we're just trying to get the waste contract sorted out, and then possibly if we've got time we'll do something with the dog bins. Anyway.
If I can just say thank you for that, because I think it's a weak area of our current contract and service, and I think that it's something that we need to pay particular attention to. At the end of the day, it's about providing a service to our residents, and it is a weak area, and as I said, it is a constant complaint area, and I get it firsthand. So I'm glad to hear that we're going to be on the case, and we are leading the way. Thank you.
Joe, you wanted to comment? I imagine us on the same subject.
Yeah, can I just ask for some clarity? Because I was always made aware that wrapped dog waste can go in any council bin, and I know in my particular ward, a lot of the dog bins, as they've rotted and started to fall, they're actually being replaced with litter bins, because wrapped dog waste can go in any bin, and if you've wrapped it, if a dog waste bin was full, there's going to be a litter bin not too many steps away if you're actually walking your animal. So I personally haven't found that an issue, but my issue is people not picking it up. But I think, like I said, the council is well catered for because it can go in any bin. Could I have some clarity on that? Thank you.
I agree that people don't realise that you can use the normal bins, and there's even a picture of the dog on the bins. So I don't know how, maybe that's just that we don't convey that to people.
Can I just jump in there? That not only do we not have enough dog waste bins, we don't have enough bins anyway for the public. So Wheatley's quite a rural area, So I think it's probably the rural areas that may well suffer more than towns. I don't know, but I'm talking about my specific ward. Thank you.
Lisa?
Thank you, Chairman. I'd just like to politely and respectfully remind the committee what their role is in relation to looking at this contract. And you know, you are here not as just ward councillors, you know, you are here as overview and scrutiny on the fact that you've got a major contract that is going to be awarded. And I think, you know, it would be good to try to sort of necessarily focus on getting assurance from the Cabinet that they feel that the contract that they could potentially be awarding shortly does provide the service that's required and also is fully funded. You know, that's the role of the Cabinet, and I'm sure once the contract is awarded, then contract management of it may be looked at later. But for now, you know, I think you've got assurance that there are improved contract management and performance indicators in there, which were not in the existing contract. So, thanks.
Thanks very much for that. The next question is.
I agree. Sorry, thanks, Chairman. I agree with Lisa. It is the most important contract in this district, and we've got to focus on that and a preference for that. But having said that, there is still some detail. I think a scrutiny, we can ask those questions that may be prevalent to the outcomes of this contract. And just listening to what Councillor Harris said and Councillor Edison said, just about specifics, about numbers and volume and costs, because this is important. This is important about the overall contract when we're going to let it, what that total sum is. Now, we raised the comment about is there enough bins in the district? And I mean, it's about comfort and assurances that we can deliver. Since COVID, you know, a lot of people get dogs. I'm getting dog myself. If I do it after the last dog I lost, but there we go. So they're out and about, and we see dog bins. This is an operational thing, and I understand that. But just a question I want to ask on page 22, it said the bidders are provided with a listed dog bin location schedule sheet, which identifies numbers of dog bins. And in the total number, and it goes on to say, this document identifies the total number of summer and seasonal seafront bins to be deployed. So it sort of walks away from the dog bins, and I understand we can put dog business into general bins now. And it says the quantity set is now a maximum of 238 bins. Well, that's a cost, and that's above the current contract number of 135. So people just need to be aware of that. We're almost doubling that element of collections in the contract. And I think it's pretty cool that we're doing that, but there is a cost to that. And I should make people in this committee aware. We're not scrutinising stuff, and we're scrutinising about the support in all the districts, and if it's about bins, what's the cost of that? That's another part that goes into this equation. And I look at it from a positive point of view. That actually we're doubling up now on bins there, so that's a very important point. I'm so positive. I don't want to be seen on criticising everything that's gone forward in this contract. So I was part of that, you know, when we was looking in the early days. I mean, so there are certain things that I just think need to be brought to the front, Lisa. And when we talk about a contract like that, massively, we know it's going to be escalating at literally 40% above what we're already paying. Plus, we've got management to deal with it. We've got a very uncertain future with 3 years and 3 plus 2 or whatever. We don't know, and I understand the complexity of that. But I think it's only fair this committee actually pulls every question out it needs to, and get the Cabinet and those that are responsible for making these decisions listen to it and have a debate to actually see that we're getting the best value for our residents going forward, both for money and service delivery. And that's as much as I really want to probably say on this subject. Thank you.
Does anyone want to respond?
I don't think there was a question in there, but I'm happy to respond. They're all good points, you know. If I was on scrutiny, which I used to be, I'd be asking about the cost of the contract and everything else. Unfortunately, because of the way it's gone, we can't tell you about that today. But if you're looking for assurance, I'm not about to put our council in any sort of special measures or anything else because of a waste contract. It is the biggest contract the council does, and it's been well thought through. We've got lots of support, external support. Our officers are great, but they're not specialists. We brought specialists in to sit there and deliver this contract. And when we found it wasn't going in the right direction, we've adjusted, we've pivoted, we've made it go to where we think it should be. There's not going to be any problems around services, there's not going to be any problems around funding this. I just wish we'd had Cabinet last week, and then I could be talking about how great it is. I can't do that, but I can reassure this committee that those concerns have been addressed in the Cabinet report that's come forward.
Okay, thank you. Graham, you want to ask the next question? You happy with that?
Why this has gone tonight? Because we've set the questions out and we've got people going on piste. What's the when we talk about scrutiny, well, we should be focused on scrutiny, shouldn't we? That's my view. Jonathan, do you want to answer a question? Okay. So this might have been asked before, but so I'm very pleased to see we've got comprehensive performance management. But is it going to be robust enough? Because when we talk about miscollections, this is what the provisions of the new contract in relation to management arrangements and application of penalties. So at the moment, am I right in saying that any miscollections have to be collected within 28 days?
So you're talking about household waste?
Yeah.
Yeah, not 28 days, no. Normally it's collected within 48 hours.
Yeah, but is there any penalty for that?
Under the current contract, no, there's not. But moving forward within the performance mechanism review, there is
There will
set
be
KPIs.
But I presume you can't tell us what that penalty will be.
No, I think that will probably come out following the cabinet decision.
Okay. And if I can just probably come to our next question, which I was going to ask. Would the procedure for requesting or obtaining replacement bins specifically be where bins are damaged? What steps will be involved, including any applicable conditions or charges? I think that's already been asked, and also the population increase, obviously. So how do we then arrive at how many more bins we're going to need? Because we've had the population increase. So what formula is going to be used to bring in more bins?
I mean, as per the contract at the moment is linked to new developments and what's in the forward plan and the local plan, basically.
Okay.
So it is linked to the local plan and properties which are planned to be developed, and as they come online, then those properties will be delivered bins and collected, which I believe was a previous question.
So what's the time span then for new developments over the last 10 years, 5 years?
In what relation, sorry?
For new bins. So if there's been no extra bins put in for the population increase.
So you're talking litter bins or bins to the householder?
For the householder.
Right, yes.
So how many do we know that we're going to increase? And also the bins themselves, the dog poo bins, and also the normal waste bins.
I think in relation to the bins, as in the containers which go to households, then that will be linked to property growth. So as they come online, then residents contact the council and we deliver the bins to them, and that's what is done at the moment.
Okay.
So and that doesn't change. If anything, it becomes a more stronger, robust service because we're building in KPIs and stronger management of that service.
Yeah.
In relation to litter bins, dog bins, or receptacles, obviously we will continue to work with the parish and town councils to support the communities and meet those needs, working with our stakeholders to deliver where required.
So is it going to be just one bin then? I know we talked that dog waste can be parcelled up, but is there now going to be just one bin for both types of waste? And are those bins going to be bigger than what we've already got?
You're talking about street litter bins.
Yeah.
That's our preference. So normally moving forward, and this is something we've been doing for several years now.
Yeah.
And I think Councillor Henderson made reference to it.
Yeah.
Where the dog bins, which are generally made out of metal, where they do rust and fall apart, we will generally, where it's practical, will replace them if needed to be replaced with a larger litter bin, which can then take rat dog waste. That gives a benefit to the residents that it's larger capacity. So not only are we replacing a dog bin with a larger capacity, they tend to be emptied more frequently as well.
So then just an aside to bins as well, certain issues are where bins are, or black bin liners are picked up by the operatives and they leave residue on the road. Is there any provision that they will be picked that up?
I think that's something which will probably be picked up as more as an operational rather than as a scrutiny question, possibly. Again, where that's highlighted, we'll always work with the contractor,
Yeah.
either the incumbent now or whoever the future contractor is, and also local parish and town councils and members of the public to obviously make the service as efficient and effective as possible.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, great. Okay, so the next question is there an option for the procurement process to be delayed following allowing sufficient time for thorough scrutiny by the committee?
The short answer to that is no.
Okay, that's fair enough. You've given a long despite. I must admit, I don't agree with the way this has been rushed through, but that's the answer I'm being given.
With respect, I don't feel it's been rushed through. We've been working on this for a year and a half. So
in private?
Well, not in private. We have working parties. You have been able to be asking us questions on this all the time. We had cabinet in 25. You are entitled to ask questions.
With respect, questions have been asked here this evening, and what we're being told is it's commercially sensitive, you can't tell us. What was the point of holding a meeting earlier when we're going to meet a wall of commercial sensitivity? As it stands at the moment, what's being said is that my car is for sale. I'm not going to tell you how much it is. Do you think the buyer is getting value for money?
The procurement system has changed, and therefore we have to abide by that. That's not us being awkward. That is the procurement system which we're following that.
So we haven't had plenty of time to look at this at all.
Yeah. I think the procurement rules stop us giving you very, very laser-focused detail. But the main cabinet portfolio gave you what we were doing. You could have done that. You could have done that then. Nothing's changed since then, and you could have brought all this kind of questioning to us then, and we could have gone through it. I think if you're feeling rushed, I'm going to sit there and say, and I know you don't agree, but this is your work programme. We've been doing this since 2024. You could have had 2-3 bites, and I'm prepared to come back after the cabinet report and talk to you about it again. So, but you're a critical friend, so you should be doing this work with us, not trying to sit there and say, well, you didn't give us enough information and you didn't do this and you didn't do that. When what's happened is in July 24, we started a procurement process. In May 25, we gave you a pivot on it, and not once did you put it on your work programme.
I still disagree with you on the points, but we are where we are. The next question is from Graham. Over to you, Graham. The next two are over to Chris.
Thank you. Would fixed-penalty notices be issued specifically following incidents of littering littering along Clacton's Heathfront. A link to that. Can you provide a detailed breakdown of the locations at which blue bins will be situated? Now, I ask this because, I like to ask this anyway because um, in the summer months there's lots of bins along the Clacton seafront, and in the winter they disappear, some of them, and there's still people walking along the seafront. And back to the dog walking thing, there's also dog walkers that use the bins, and my wife walks my dog regularly along the seafront, and the amount of people that throw their dog mess bins on the floor because there's not enough bins provided, and also um, in the summer, in the winter months, when it's a nice day, people come down, spend time on the beach, and some of the times the bins are overflowing even in the winter. So that's why I wanted to ask the question. Thank you.
If I can pick up the first one about the fixed penalty notices, it's never been a part of the contract. The contractor isn't obliged. There's nothing to do with them, the enforcement. So that is a separate issue. When it comes to the breakdown of the blue bins, we put the bins out there so they're seasonal. You have to have a seasonal change. So, I mean, I monitor the bins in my ward regularly, and I get told that they're full. Many are not. What you find is you might find one full bin that everyone seems to gravitate towards, and the others are empty. And I've had loads of times where I've actually taken photos and put that on Facebook to show people. So we take into account what we possibly can.
You do take quite a lot away in the winter, don't you? Especially on the east side of town. The west side you get fine, but the east side particularly, where I live, my wife walks her dog. There's hardly any bins along there in the winter months. But she said there's always people throwing rubbish and especially dog mess on the floor because Anyway, I thought.
Sorry, if you've got one more question, if you want to ask the question, I'll come back in a minute. It's just to give some advice, but it's not on the back of that question. So if you want to carry on with the questioning, yeah.
Is there any further questions, Chris? No? Okay, I've got a couple of questions just to finish, if unless anyone else has got any. The first one, within the contract, what scope is there to amend it? If things aren't going as planned, what scope is there to amend the contract, or are we where we are?
Sorry, if I can ask John to answer that one.
Thank you. The contract we've got is a very robust contract. So built within there are provisions where, and I think it was mentioned earlier, we will have quarterly annual reviews around efficiencies. Those efficiencies can be shared as well. There's change in law legislation built into it as well. So where, as the name suggests, there are changes in legislation which are outside of our control, that can be adapted into the contract. So there are mechanisms built within the contract, which was the advantages of using those key expertise of contractors like Sharp Pritchard, Eunomia and WRM, who provided us with their years of experience in the waste sector, which gave us that contract where it gives us that flexibility to continue that dialogue with the contractor to shape the contract moving forward.
Okay, thanks for that. That explains quite a bit. If there are changes then, would that, obviously the contractor would be in a position where he could adjust his costs? So for example, if the government put through, you've now got to do X instead of Y, and it incurred more work, would the contractor be justified or able to increase his costs to facilitate that requirement?
I think with this contract, I mean, yes, is the answer to that. I mean, it would all have to be transparent and, you know, kind of scrutinised by the officers and the waste board to understand. They would need to set out very clearly where their additional costs are coming from. So it would be very transparent to the organisation that if there was a change in legislation which left the contractor worse off, where those costs were. If there could be a change in legislation where there would be savings, and then in which case it could go both ways basically. But yes, the process is very transparent that if there were costs, the contractor would have to be very clear and transparent in how they set out and demonstrate where those costs are associated.
Okay, thanks very much for that. Appreciate it. Peter, then Mike.
Thank you, Chair. Just on that theme, really, looking at contracts, is there something contained in the contracts that if there was a serious breach of contract or a continuous failure to achieve the SLAs, where we could, if it came to it, terminate the contract, give notice, which we hope will never ever happen. Of course, I'm sure that sensible dialogue would, resolve any issues. But is that built into the contract? And also the other way, is there any term or termination that the other side could give the contract? And if there is, how much notice would they need to give? And what are the penalties there if they did do that? Are there any? Thank you.
I'm going to pass that to you again, John. You live, breathe, and sleep the.
In answer to your first question, yes, yeah, there is a just as there is in this contract now. There's a set procedure which would have to be played out where if the dialogue broke down and if even bringing in external mediators failed, then the contract could be ceased basically. The other way around, I think so, but I'm not sure on that. I mean,
in most contracts, you would. You'd have a clause that suits both parties, so it couldn't be just one party holding on. So yes, it would apply to both.
Yeah, I think normally for the authority to fail, it's part of the contract would normally be around payment, basically, which obviously is extremely rare. Yeah, the notice period on that, I'm not sure. I'd need to look basically at the contract. I mean, the contract, as you hopefully appreciate, is a very large document, kind of over 100 pages basically, so of complex detail, but it will be in there, but I can find that out for you.
And Mike?
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. Yeah, just sort of summarising from my perspective, really. I mean, the documents that you provided over the time and was involved early on when I was in the Cabinet, I think it has been thought through. It is thorough. But it's very unknown in terms of, we know when I first looked at it, when we sat round the table and we looked at existing costs, we knew we were so off beam, 11-year-old contract, things change, legislation and all of that. We're playing catch up and behind the curve. I think the attempt, and I give credit to the officers and everyone, they've actually, and the professional people that supported this through. I know it's cost us sort of 400,000, and I don't think them costs have ended yet. But I mean, by the time we get to finalising the contract agreement, maybe that's already been decided because it's commercially sensitive. But the thing I would just simply say, from my own background, 50 odd years in construction and contracting, for me it's just simple. I mean, you look at simple aspects. You've got a relationship which we've had with, you're not saying we're going to stay with them, but we've got a specification, and that specification is about compliance. It's about compliance about legislation. It's about what we expect to deliver for our residents. That's the first part of the framework. And then there's a cost element. And then whenever you look at that cost, we know that cost has increased. We're not naive. We can argue about it. administration, last administration, the costs have increased, and a lot of the pressures have been put on us is through government and legislation. So we've got the cost. So we've got that. We can find some point where we agree where we're going to go and sign that off. And then we've got the most important part, the performance and delivery. And we spoke about it, and various people around here are talking about the contract liabilities. And if you get to a point where you've got to get the contracts out under your desk and you're going to have a fight, the relationship's over. And you've got to look back. Have we been in that relationship with Veolia? And again, I'm not using them as an example, but I'm just saying this, if we've got a good relationship and we can make it work with the changes, with the costs, and we can talk to them and we can have some flexibility in it, then it's a big thing going forward. And I think they're the things, and for me, there's always been a gap about the management of the way we've operated these contracts in the past. I just think it should be management led by this authority and not let the contractor lead us in what we do. We know what we want for our residents. We know our cost parameters. We know we've got not a lot of flexibility, as we've seen it, but where we're going, and we're putting funds here to actually support where we might go. But as far as I'm concerned, I'm very assured, and it's, what's gone on before with the officers in terms of looking at this, we're now in a realistic space. And for me, we've got to see where it goes. After the 14th of November, we'll see that come out on the table. We want to see exactly what that delivery is going to be with all the facilities we have to provide to actually, from our residents, to actually collect, so that what we're facing, and there's all of that. And it comes the administration. For me, that's the long haul. And I mean, I've looked at, you look at, contract March, April, 6 months, as John Hamlet said, getting it into smoothing out the problems. Yeah, we're going to be there for 3 years. What goes on after this with LGR and combined authorities is another world, considering they deliver in-house. So what we do is the here and now, we've got to try to get ourselves over the line for this next period of time. And all we make certain is this scrutiny committee is actually, we make certain that we're looking at every aspect, that we can actually have input to the cabinet to say, maybe you're off beam with that, and what can we do? That decision is going to be made in the next couple of weeks. It's all probably been made, to be fair. And I'd really recommend, the leader of this council to come back afterwards to say, this is it, this is what we've decided, and let's have another round of scrutiny and burn his ears. Because that's what I think. Because in 6 months' time, or in June next year, get him back again and burn his ears again because he's not performing. I don't want to have that meeting, because hopefully we're going to overcome those sort of teething problems. This is a realistic, pragmatic way I look at life in what we're trying to do for our residents. And if we all get residents burning their ears saying, do you know what, we ain't getting that picked up, and there's dog bins full up in here and there, we'll get straight on to this team and just saying, you said this, but you're not delivering. That's our job. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I don't think there was a question there. I think that's just views, which I can understand people being concerned about this contract. I've got one final question, and that goes back to the point I made earlier about someone wanting to buy my car and not knowing the cost. So I'm going to ask, is it possible for us to go into Part B so we can be given that information?
Thank you, Chairman. You must have read my mind, because when I put my hand up to indicate to speak following the questioning. So I think it's important to highlight that the reason that a couple of bits of information are commercially sensitive, they are commercially sensitive from being released into the public domain at this point, but you do have the provisions to go into Part B if you wish to ask questions in the Part B part of the agenda, of which then further information could be provided to you if that's the assurance you require. So, of course, commercially sensitive doesn't mean that you as a committee can't be told. You just can't be told in Part A.
Thank you for that, Lisa. I personally, on that question, would like to go into Part B, but I'd like to not spend a great amount of time in it because we do have another item which is around finance. But I know one or two questions have been answered, and I think that may help us lead towards whether, what we're getting and what we pay for. Matthew.
Thank you, Chair. Just before we sort of move on, just a couple of quick points, if I can, and a question as well. Firstly, to our new Vice Chair, welcome and thank you for taking the role. I look forward to working with you on this committee, and as I say, thank you for taking the role. Secondly, over to Leader of the Council, I almost feel like we have a new committee member. We've seen you that many times at this committee, which is a huge credit, really, that you're prepared to put yourself up for this kind of intense scrutiny. Yeah, I just wonder, how many times have you actually appeared in front of this committee, and how many more times will we see you? It's a rhetorical question, no need to answer, but thank you for taking the time out this evening. To our portfolio holder of the subject we're talking about here, I do have a question or a suggestion, really. But before I raise that, I really just wanted to say to you, thank you for picking this up partway through. Can't have been an easy task. Can't have been an easy decision to sort of say, yes, I'll pick up this contract and this portfolio, because it was partway through, and it is, as we've all recognised, the biggest contract we run. I'm sure you're all at the right time. We're not quite there yet. We don't quite have the final details. I'm sure when we get there you will thank your team, who have clearly worked extremely hard on pulling all this together, and I have no doubt at all that real granular detail has been thought through, and the rollout will be very well coordinated. It's the coordination of that rollout that I was just going to propose, or ask a question, propose a solution. Would it be possible to build some sort of councillor pack? What I'm really thinking of here is we all in this room attend lots of committees, lots of peer groups, lots of community groups, lots of events, and we're often asked to speak. What a great topic for us to speak about, and what a great message and a conduit, really, for the Cabinet to get this message out. If we could have some sort of a pack, a 5-minute, 10-minute sort of PowerPoint presentation, maybe for that type of event, or some handouts, or some one-page crib sheets or notes, I think it'd be a really good way of utilising us as, ward councillors, and getting us to sing for our supper, as it were, and help deliver that message, because change is scary, as we all know. Change is scary, and we do talk to residents. Councillor Harris said earlier, who are, when do I put this out? When do I put that out? What do I do on this day? What goes in the box this week? What goes in the box next week? So use us, please. That's my question, really. So thank you, Chair. That was what I wanted to say.
Thanks for your input. Does anyone want to respond to that?
I'm happy to do that. I will try and make sure that we give you as much information as you could possibly use.
As I say, if you'd like any, viewpoints on what to go into that pack, feel free to contact me, and I'll willingly help in any way I can. But what I'm really saying is use us, but if you can deliver us a pack that we can use when we are attending these community events, meetings, etc., and we are often asked to speak for 5-10 minutes and just about what's going on at the council, what a great subject to talk about, and feel free to use us for that.
Thank you. We'll definitely try and put something together for you.
Thank you. With that, I think I need Keith to read the statement, Ham?
I think you're going to move that under Section 100A4 of the Local Government Act 1972, the press and public be excluded from the meeting during the consideration of this element of the item on the grounds that it will involve the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in, and I think it's paragraphs 3 and probably 6A of Part 1 of Schedule 12A as amended by the Act. And that will need a mover and a seconder.
So I'm happy to move that. Do I have a seconder? Oh, Matthew, Keith, I don't mind. Whoever. Yep, whatever. Matthew, get your name on the sheet. Okay, I have a proposal and a second.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, you're right to check.
So, are we all happy with that?
To move into Part B.
Move into Part B.
Make that statement? Is it because...
Tim.
Okay. Oh, I see. Okay. I just thought that maybe they was involved with the final decisions, or no, on the summary. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Just wait for that. So hopefully that's helped a bit on the value for money side if anyone's thinking, is it value for money from what we've seen? Obviously, I don't know, at this point we'll move to the next stage, which is the next item, which is the outturn report. I don't know if anyone would like to leave now or whether they want to stay to the end. But yeah, support 5 minutes and then we'll go because time is ticking. So,
Chairman, do we, on the recommendations of that last item, do we have to vote for that?
come back to that at the end and
Oh,
then
okay.
deal with, because now we've got a little bit more information. We just got to be cautious. Peter.
Once whoever it is who gets the contract, what do they do with the waste? Where does it go? Is it going to landfill? Is it going to the incinerator? Is it being recycled? Where does Tendering's waste go, please?
So the black sack waste all goes to Endeavour in Rivenhall, where it is heated and converted into electricity. The plastic, the cardboard, that all gets recycled. The food waste, that goes and becomes biofuel. And in all fairness, I actually think you all should know that. I know in other areas they don't know that. So
Now the public do, because that's why I asked the question. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, okay. So with that, we'll let Damien have an early night. are we ready for the next part? I know time is ticking, so we'll try and crack on with the next part. There are a few questions on that, so if I read them out and then respond.
Do you want to receive the
Yeah, if you like, Richard. I think the presentation may well answer quite a few of the questions, won't it?
If it's useful, is quickly run through some stuff that was perhaps missing from the agenda or is missing from the agenda, just to run through. You've got that information in front of you. Then I think it feeds nicely into the questions. I don't think they won't get answered necessarily straight from the presentation, but just so you're happy, give me sort of just a few minutes just to run through some additional financial stuff.
Yep.
and sort of take it from there, if that's okay.
That'd be brilliant.
Yeah.
Over to you then.
So what's in the agenda is the report that the leader would have agreed back in June, because there's a delegation to the leader to agree the outturn. Then you've also got the report that goes to cabinet. You've got the appendices or the appendix that went to cabinet to approve the allocation of the outturn, so the total outturn position, plus there are some additional items as well. What you've not got is the report, the outturn report, the full detail report. There's a massive load of detail behind that. So it was really just to kind of touch on it, if that's okay. So in terms of, this is the detailed report that the leader would have agreed back in June, and the report to cabinet just basically summarises this. But I think so you've had that in your agenda pack. I think what I don't want to sort of like I'm not going to necessarily page turn it, but just so you get a sense of the detail that went behind this in terms of the appendices. Sorry, I'm going to sort of if anyone's going through this too quickly, and I'll test you in a minute if you've spotted anything. But going through, I just want to just draw attention to, if I get there in a second, is this appendix here. So, and I'll go really quickly through it just to get a sense of the detail, because there's a lot of detail in here. So this covers the sort of, we pull out the main variances. So we're going outturn now, outturn 24-25. There's always a time lag with the outturn, because this is obviously the end. This is as at the 31st of March 2025, which we report through, and unfortunately, given sort of meeting dates, you're seeing it here. So what you wouldn't have seen yet is we've got the Q2 position for 25-26 going to cabinet shortly. So that's the most up-to-date position. So this is kind of looking back to the end of last year. So there's a huge lot of detail that goes through each of the directorates. So we've got some variances that we're pulling out that are the main reasons for the overall underspend at the end of 4.5, which is 5.417 million. So the council underspent by 5.417 million at the end of 4.5. This pulls out the main areas of that, and as you can see, there's a huge level of detail around behind this. So we go through every single directorate, we go through the capital programme, and everything else. This is sort of in the public domain, so this isn't new in terms of that. And I'll just shrink that down a bit, but you can see it's just a huge level of information. So if you're happy, I think for me it's just talking through quickly, as a conscious time, around the main variances that are summarised up here. And I don't think there's any surprise. I think for me, because the budget was adjusted through the budget setting process. So the 4.5 budget was adjusted through the budget setting process, and also during the year there are changes to the budget as we become aware of things. So a real good, proper sort of financial management, good housekeeping. Let's adjust the budget as we go, and I think in terms of 4.5 overall, most of the budget's performed to the underlying sort of position that we were expecting. But these are some of the items that we're drawing out. So no surprise to some of these in terms of our cash. We talk about this one, don't we, often, in terms of our favourable cash flow, interest received. So if your favourable cash flow position and interest rates are sitting slightly higher at the moment, you know, £828,000 we made more than budget from our investments. We also done really well against business rates in terms of the level of underlying income that our businesses are paying in terms of rates, and a number of items that you can see here. It's very difficult to take you through this in this kind of format and reasonably late at night. So do you want me to go into more, sort of to go through this in more detail, or not?
Obviously, we're seeing this for the first time, and I can't see that anyway. So I'm not sure what we're looking at and why we're looking at it. I haven't had that information to look through it, and whilst I understand that you're going to talk about it,
yeah,
I haven't got time to actually analyse it or go through it. So I'm not actually sure what the point is.
So as a committee, there's a choice there. I mean, the thing is, we've got the Q2 report upcoming as well, haven't we? Which I don't know when your next meeting is in January. Is it January? January. The meeting is you've got the outturn position is one of those key milestones during the year, and it just feeds into later reports, because if there's an issue that we experience in 4 or 5, have we addressed it? That's good or bad. You know, if there's an issue that cropped up in 4 or 5, have we addressed it? So the story gets updated as we go through the kind of financial reports. So as a committee, whether you want to go back to the questions you've got, which are quite specific, and then when you want to revert back to this as part of your overall budget work, you do, to look at the Q2 position, which is a much more up-to-date position, that's gonna get presented to cabinet, and then the budget proposals. So in that sense, that would be a pragmatic way forward, but it's up to the committee if you want to do that, taking a point that Councillor Harris has made. So whether you want to revert back to those questions specifically.
Mike wants to speak and then ask, what does the committee want to do?
Thank you, Chairman. The only bit of paper I have in front of me for this meeting this evening is the variances on the 24-25 outturn on Section 1, the allocation of general fund outturn, Section 2, the in-year budget adjustment, and Section 3, which are summaries on those headings, not the background. So are we discussing these variances only? And why, I suppose? I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, because you're seeing the bit that was included in the agenda is the allocation of the overall outturn position. So that's what you've had in the agenda, and if that's what you want to focus on, plus your questions, or whether you want to go through that in more detail later on. It all kind of, as I said, it all kind of builds. So the outturn will build into Q2, and it will build into the budget proposals for 6-7, which we're now into that cycle as well. So whether that's a pragmatic approach we could take for that after Christmas get together, we bring the financial position all together then. But,
what does the committee think?
The report that Mr. Barrett has put up on the screen is actually in front of members on the table. I know that's not specifically answering in advance, but it is on the table. So you should be able to cross-reference what is being said, albeit that I do entirely appreciate that that's not in advance, and giving you the opportunity to look at that ahead of tonight's meeting. No, I think it should be on the table in front of you, and is
I know some members opt for email documents and others have by post. Personally, I have paper copies for any committee that I sit on sent to me so that I can write on them and bring them along and refer to them. I wonder if other members of the committee would like to do the same. I'm sure we can arrange that if that's the case. Would it help if each committee member received paper copies rather than email for future committee meetings?
I think that's an individual choice.
It is an individual choice. So I think what I'm saying is, hands up anyone who'd like to receive paper copies in the future. We'll get that recorded and sent out. So Mike would, yeah. I think I find it easier because you can sit down at home, put a couple of notes on, or you can fold a page over and refer to it. When you're scrolling through, even if you type on a document, it doesn't stand out so clearly. That's just my view, but it just aids. So Joe said yes, Sarah, Peter and Mike, and Chris. You've got one anyway, okay? So I hope we can arrange that.
I think, Chairman, everybody on the committee probably already receives paper copies. If you've got your basic paper copies for this meeting, then that will continue for you.
I got it. as I say, through in two stages. I got the two, and then the one you got as a second document that came through later. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and there should be two cabinet reports, and as I say, this followed on. No. Questions then, because I'm mindful. So, question one, what is the total amount of ring-fenced funding? What are the specific purposes for which these funds are being allocated? And are the associated projects or initiatives expected to be delivered as planned?
Do you just want me to read the answer out to start with? Yeah, I mean, only for the audience that will watch this Griffin meeting later. So, it is assumed that ring fence funding relates to where a decision has been made to allocate a budget via the budget setting process, financial performance reports, or separate decisions during the year. With this in mind, the associated decisions would have set out the basis, purpose of the funding, and/or further delegations agreed, and the items would subsequently be included within the budget with progress reports within the regular financial performance reports that would provide commentary around the delivery of the projects or initiatives as necessary. Was there a specific ring-fence funding the committee would like more information on?
Committee members, is there any particular ring-fence budget you're interested in and would like to receive additional information on? Peter.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I want to talk about some of the figures in this. Are we able to do that now, or?
Well, let's crack through the questions and then we'll do that.
Okay.
Okay. So there's an appeal at this stage, but obviously if there is something that pops up, I'm sure the committee will ask me to get in touch and ask you to provide that information. Okay. Graham.
Yeah, I don't know if there's a glossary we can do, like a one-pager, like an idiot's guide, if you like, with ring-fenced projects with the amounts. Because I know it is all in the information in the various reports what we get, but sometimes it's a little bit to extrapolate all of that. Is that easy, or?
Would you mind?
I'd probably ask more questions back, Councillor Steady, just to understand exactly what we're trying to do. Because you've got reserves, you've got one-off money set aside. So we'd probably have to, is it something we could do outside of this committee and ever think through that? Because I think understanding what you're trying to get at to improve the information, absolutely fine. I just need to probably ask a few questions to get a bit around what you're after.
Yeah, okay, do it afterwards. Yeah.
Perhaps, obviously, Graham, you could, if you're planning afterwards, that you could then bring it to the budget meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah, be a good idea. Yeah, brilliant. Okay, that was the first question. Second one, what is the financial impact should the cost of the waste contract exceed its initial expectations?
Kind of feel like we've answered this, but I'll read it out. As set out in the May 2025 Cabinet report, it was highlighted that the proposed approach would be based on the use of one-off funding, supported by savings and efficiencies within the overall general fund revenue budget as necessary. This remains the planned approach with no direct impact on the provision or existing services. And bear in mind what we heard in Blue Page, as you can see it's fully funded.
Anyone, any comments on that one? No? Okay. Next question, can you provide clarification on the source of any additional funding required and the anticipated budgetary position in such circumstances?
Within the outturn report for 24-25, 2.417 million has already been set aside to support the cost of the contract in accordance with the proposed use of one-off money set out above. It is proposed to utilise a limited number of currently uncommitted one-off budgets to meet the initial 3-year cost of the contract.
Any comments? No, okay, and the next question is there a contingency plan? Is there a contingency plan in place to address any potential overspend associated with the Carnarvon Terrace project?
And discussed and include within risk management plans a contingency sum has been allocated to the project from within the overall agreed budget. The consideration of this key issue will also be revisited with the associated report relating to the procurement process, which is planned to be presented to Cabinet in early 2026.
Thank you. Any comments? Okay. And the next question then is, can you provide assurance that should any such overspend occur, this committee would be formally notified?
Yep. Such issues would form part of Cabinet reports as necessary and therefore available to all members. They would be included within the regular financial performance reports as necessary that already form part of the committee's work programme.
Okay, thanks for that. So that covers any questions on that one? Okay, Peter's gripping his piece of paper, so over to you, Peter. You've got any questions on that? I've got one, which is just an inquiry, but as I say, Peter may well cover it.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I read this report with great interest. The in-year budget adjustments 25-26, and it says at the top here that £45,000 is to fund the creation of a fixed-term refugee support officer post to support responsibilities associated with asylum dispersal. Now, it would seem that 45,000 is actually a grant from government, so it's cost neutral to the council. Have I read that right? If you can confirm. Is this, well, if you could just sort of elaborate really on this post, and is that £45,000 cost an ongoing cost? It does say fixed term. How long's the fixed term? And precisely what does that individual do and why is it needed, please?
We were just deciding whether to give you a written response on that one or not, but I'm going to go with it and see what happens. So this is in relation to refugees obviously coming out, and they present to us as homeless once they've been given their ability to stay. I don't know what the exact wording is. And they literally turn up at a door and say, where do I get my next meal? Yeah, and there's no preparation, no nothing. And for us, it was like, we need to understand how we can get in there earlier and help these people assimilate into wherever it is. Sometimes refugees aren't best suited to be in this part. There's communities that are better suited to have them. And so sometimes we would sit there and say, do you know what, we're going to work with you and whoever, where do you want to go, sort of thing. Do you want to stay in Clacton, Tendring, Colchester, further afield, and for me, that was what the provincial element of that is. So it was about accommodating people who were given asylum status, I think refugee status, a way forward rather than just turning up on the door going, where do I get my next meal? And we had that too many times, and it was just felt that we weren't dealing with that properly. So that's what it's about. Does that help? Probably should have given you the written response now.
Well, it certainly sparks a number of questions. As you will probably be aware, this is a topic of great concern to the general public. When you say refugees and they just turn up, ask for something to eat, are we talking about illegal people that come to this country? So we're not?
We're not. So it says there, in recognising the council's responsibilities associated with asylum dispersal, and it's proposed to create the necessary internal capacity, the costs of which will be fully met from the relevant grant funding made available by the government. And that's not about dispersing illegal immigrants. That is about people who have been granted, and then what do they do next? The right to remain. Thank you. The right to remain. I knew there was a problem. I just couldn't think of it. So when they've been given the right to remain, we then say, okay, what is it that you want? And a lot of the time, people want to be with their family, their own community, and they end up somewhere where they don't want to be. You know, and it's like we can help them get to where they need to be. If that makes sense. And it's better for everybody all round. Yeah.
The question is, do we know who these people are? Are we informed by government that they are coming to the area? And, you know, when we say we ask them where do they want to go, are we providing them with housing? Or
so I'm going to stop you there. We're kind of straight outside of the finance. You know, I'm happy to take the questions. I'm not trying to avoid them, but I think if you're going to keep going backwards and forwards with me, I really do need you to write them down, and I'll give you a written response.
Okay, I'm happy for that, Chair. If I can get a written response, sort of more of an explanation as to what the role is. And
if you could send me the complete list of your questions, I'll get you a complete answer.
I am quite happy to meet you separately to raise those questions directly with you, if you wish.
Send me the questions.
That'd be great. Before I grant a response, can I ask that not necessarily the questions be circulated to the committee, but the questions along with Mark's answers circulated, and then everyone will know what's been said. I think that might be helpful. Graham.
Do we know if Colchester and Braintree have got such a post, or have they got the same government funding as what we've got?
The answer is I don't know. I'll add that to the written response.
I've got one question on the sheet, and that's around the homelessness costs, which you're now committing another $1 million to that. So that's in effect doubling the amount we've committed. That's quite a considerable jump. What do you attribute that to?
I think it's a nationwide thing. Yeah, I'm not going to sit there and say it's anything specific to tendering. In fact, I don't want to say too much. Although the costs are going up, our costs are not going up as much as other people's are. You know, and I think that's due to things like Spendles. Yeah, Spendles has actually outperformed our expectations on those sort of fronts. We've also gone after a better quality of place to put people in. So we've moved away from hotels, so we don't have any hotels unless there's a specific reason to have that person in a hotel. I think the costs themselves, I think there's an inflationary rise, but there's also a bigger demand. You know, at the moment we haven't got a single family outside of Spendles, so they're all in our secure unit over in Walton. You know, but it is on the rise, and it is on the rise across the nation. You know, and it's a thing that does worry me because, like you say, it's another £1 million, and that's why Councillor Baker and I have an officer working party to look at how we can not only drive the costs down, but we're looking at the prevention, which that asylum position is part of. You know, we don't want homeless people in temporary accommodation. We want them to have homes. We all enjoy a home here, and I really would love that to be the case for everybody.
I think it's later on the next item. I think it's something that can be highlighted in the housing strategy because the two are inadvertently linked. You know, the housing strategy that we're producing, and we've got a homeless problem that is spiralling, however you look at it, and for whatever reason that's happening. So, Mike.
Yeah, can I just ask the leader, do we know what the percentage or number of voids we still have out there where we could home these people?
Actually, that's one of the ones I do track. So, speaking to Councillor Baker the other day, we are under 2%, which is our goal, is to stay 2% or under. I think we're just under 2%. It fluctuates around 2%, but it's not a huge amount over it if it does go over.
Peter.
Thank you, Chair. Back to the homelessness figure. I think you mentioned asylum seekers. Is this the increase of asylum seekers part of this homelessness figure? And secondary, when we was on a subcommittee, I think it was last year, on housing, and I specifically asked the question about whether the numbers of homeless in tendering has a direct correlation between unemployment. And the answer was yes. Now, with the increase in unemployment, is that, could you check, if you don't know that, but come back to me and see whether there is a correlation between homelessness and the unemployment, and we're seeing more youth unemployment now. So is that part of the reason? I need to know, really, what I'd like to know is, why that figure is increasing, and what are the issues that within our districts is causing that, and it's costing obviously ratepayers more money.
And I think Keith wants to.
Yeah, just Chairman, obviously there is a wide degree of latitude in questions that are permitted in respect of finance reports, but it is a finance report, and I think we need to be conscious of the fact that that's what we're looking at, not those things that those policy issues that might be driving some of that. So I think whilst I get why you're interested in it, Councillor Harris, I think we have to respect the fact that the housing portfolio holder would be the best person to ask those questions of. We've got the leader here.
So I do understand that, sorry, but obviously I am trying to drill into this cost, and whilst it might be a sensitive issue, we do need to know that.
Something I'm just thinking aloud now. Further down the article, we're looking at the working groups, and one of those is around the housing strategy. And I wonder if, at the moment, me and poor old Bernie are the only two that have put our names forward for that. So I don't know if perhaps you'd like to join us, Peter, and because obviously part of the strategy can be tied up with the costs of that. Mark.
Just before you start that working party, there is a report coming in January around the work that the working party's done around temporary homelessness. So that might answer a lot of questions then, and you might want to decide whether you want that working party after that.
Put the two together in a way, do you think?
Well, I think if once you've read it, you might want to scrutinise it here, but once you've read it, you might decide that you don't need to do the working party, because, like you say, it's hard to get people to. There's a lot of work going on for councillors at the same time. So that temporary accommodation will come to Cabinet. That's already been agreed for the next Cabinet after December, so whenever that will be.
January?
I'm going to guess it's January, so I like to think it will be, but you lose track of the days. So yeah, and that will be something that you could base your working party around if you felt the need at that point. So I do want to answer one particular question that did come out from Councillor Harris. Asylum seekers are very, very low on the graph. Most of our 75% of our temporary accommodation come from antisocial behaviour, landlords, and I can't remember what the other one is, but yeah, family disputes.
I think based on the last meeting we had, the high proportion was
25% is the rest. Okay, and to be clear, because Councillor Harris took it, the 25% was the rest. There are about another 20 things on that list, and asylum seekers are down the bottom. It's not a big issue for us. Yeah, it is for other areas, I'll take that, but for tendering, very quietly, because I don't want anybody to know, it's not a big issue for us.
I think from the previous statement, and this is from memory, so don't quote me on it, I believe when we looked at it before, when the housing was either at this meeting or Cabinet, it's what I call family or relationship breakdowns was quite high. Probably like families breaking up, and yeah. But as I say, I remember that one being quite high. I think it was 161, something like that, I believe. Some figure around. It was quite a high figure, which was like family breakdown or or friend breakdown, which I assume to be where a friend was living with friends and that relationship broke down, and that was quite a high one. I can't remember the other figures, it was a while back, so, but there we are. Mike.
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. Yeah, just going back onto the numbers, I'm going to talk about the numbers, then I'll talk about policy. So obviously we've got this £1 million additional expenditure budget. The leader said we have a 2% void situation. Can we specifically say how many houses, how long, and what is the cost of having them empty to offset this cost to actually get people back into housing? Because we sort of skirt around the truth about this. We can talk about numbers, but there is hidden numbers here. It's a cost to the council. That's the onus cost. Is it the lack of being able to rent those properties and have them in the space? Or is it that's the cost that we're paying out for them? I just need to get a clarity in that budget, because there's got to be ways how we can possibly address. If we've got 2% of what was our stock, 3,500, I don't know. So how many houses are empty? So what is the cost standing there empty to this council, where we could be putting them in there with minimum refurbishment works to make it habitable, to get these people off the street and out of their problems that they're facing socially? Because that is something for me, I'd need to understand if there's a strategy for it and how we're going to make that money work to pull this cost down. Thank you.
You helped me answer. This all sounds familiar from a few years ago when we were the other way round. So
I kind of stepped into housing. I'll give it a go. So homelessness and our waiting list. That's what you're talking about. So if we were to bring in a policy that allowed people who are homeless to go into our voids, and there is, you're right, 2% is about 60, 65, to be accommodated into our voids, which they couldn't be because there's a churn. Generally, people move out. It takes a while to turn them around because at the same time, we're upgrading our properties, we're removing the asbestos that is in some of them, and that's why it's taken some time. Some of the properties, long-term voids, you know, we know them, we're dealing with them in a sort of very pragmatic way, I'm going to say, and leave it at that. But what we would end up doing is putting people into voids from temporary accommodation, and then people would see that as a way of getting a council house, and then we'd end up with an even bigger temporary accommodation problem because people would see that rather than the housing list as a way to get a council house. And so you can't mix the two, Mike. I understand it. You know, we discussed it, yeah, and in our heads, business heads, that's what we do, you know. But then you start working through the outcomes of it all, and it'll actually make the problem bigger. Yeah, we believe. So we decided that's not a way forward.
is there any other questions on this particular? So yeah, I think we done all the questions. Yeah. So we were just on the Appendix B additional sheet. So okay, at that point, if there's no further questions, we'll have a brief debate and decide on recommendations on that. I'd like to thank you for coming along and putting us for a while. I know I think you referred to us as a critical friend, but I'd also like to say we are here to hold you account, and I, for one, try and do that to the best of my ability. So thank you again for coming along this evening.
If I can just pop in, critical friend, not hold me account, is the comment. Because we finished the waste one so quickly, I want to have my ears burned. You know, if you want me to come back, I'm quite happy for Councillor Bush to burn my ears after the cabinet introduction and 6 months after, to see how the implementation gone, and 6 months after that, if that's what's needed. It's your work programme. I'm always available to this committee. I've been, as Councillor Benison said, I may as well be a member of this committee the amount of times I've been, and just to answer your question, I think I've only missed one, you know, and that was by accident. So, all right, thank you very much, Chairman. It's been a pleasure, as
when
always.
you was chairman of the Scrutiny Committee, and I remember being a repeat offender at your meetings quite regularly. So.
Yes, revenge is a sweet thing. So, thank you very much, Chairman.
Again for your time. I think that the first one is obviously on the waste strategy, and I've got to be very careful how I phrase this. What was the phrase you came up with that I could say regarding the finance?
I think it was your understanding that the likely financial burden on the council was in the same ballpark as where you thought it would be.
And I said that without moving my lips. So that's based on my view on the finance side. So I don't know what other people's view are on that. Then obviously, if there's any other parts, I think we are where we are. There appears to be key point indicators in the document. So it's difficult to scrutinise it in depth. As I said, it'd been better to have much more detail of what we're getting for the money. But we are where we are. That being said, maybe either 6 months in or whatever, or possibly 12 months in, we need to revisit. And I think from our points of view, we will have feedback from residents. And we will also have feedback from officers and members of how it's gone. I suppose however we look at it, those first few months are going to be bumpy anyway, because you're looking at a changeover where people put their bins out incorrectly, get it wrong or whatever. And from that side, I'd like to see an approach where if someone does make a mistake, there's not some approach where we stick a sticker on it saying I'm not collecting that. That something is done to say you put it out at the wrong time, we'll take it on this occasion however. So they don't feel, that's just my views, that's just an opening. I don't know what other people think.
At our January meeting with the budgets on the 14th of January, because we'll have it'll go to cabinet next week, won't it? Yeah. And they'll do their bit, and that might give us an opportunity in January just to answer some of the questions.
We could, and I'm happy to do that. I'm just bearing in mind what we've got. But what will we know? It will be enforced, but we won't know how effective it's been or what's happened. If it's taken off on a successful route, or whether there's teething problems or whatever, we're not going to know. It's a case of waiting for the situation to develop one way or another. I imagine if it develops with silence, that's quite good, because people are happy with it. They're not going to get on to councillors. They're not going to get on to the council. If they're unhappy, then they're likely to. It's just we don't want to overwhelm it when we've got other things to look at. But we do need to be mindful that 6 months down the road, where are we and what's happened? You know, I mean, as members now, I represent Peer Ward, and I think people will email me if they've been down for the day, because Peer Ward must be the seafront, mustn't it? Because it's pier. And I get complaints emailed in with photographs, and it's been quite a bad year this year. And I know, I said the other day, I know Bernie was copied in one, so he must know that particular person where they've sent photos in, and it's been dreadful at times. There's been overflowing blue bins, there's been rubbish all over the beach. So give that to see where it goes and what actually happens as that flows.
Can I just sort of say, I mean, I'm a massive advocate for data, and the whole idea of going forward with this new contract is to have a QR code in and bins. Everyone will have be labelled. So we in-cab technology with the routes. This is about performance KPIs. Is that all the routes for the various trucks will be scanning the bins. Missed collections will flag up. Percentage of delivery. And I've always advocated, so in a screen in the town hall, in our collection, can't we have a screen up there that this ward, that ward, of only 80% of pickups? Why? And that data is there now, the technology is there. Veolia are using it all over the country. We're a bit behind the curve with that. And hopefully a part of this, which I encourage, that data is important. What you've all discussed, missed bins, where they are, blue bins, have them QR coded, it's scheduled on the list. If it gets missed, we know. The management team knows, will know.
So it's probably being used by all contractors, different firms across the country.
Yeah.
So whoever gets the contract for us will probably have the same.
Yeah. So it will hopefully give that data back to us, and we can see where those pressure points are and where we're getting the missed, and then we can actually call in the performance of the contractor saying, hey, this area, you are missing out X, and call them in. This is all about performance management. And I think I've encouraged that very much when I was in the cabinet to do that, because I just believe without data, we don't know. As you know, as Chris said there, oh, we've got problems here, we've got problems there, regular problems. Why have we got regular problems? It will identify that, and we can hone in to that to improve that service. So when a resident phones us, Paul, we can just say, yeah, we understand that, we're dealing with it. We know that problem. And that is really where we need to move this forward. And sometimes it's not all about cost, because I think if you see that improvement of performance, it can actually benefit a contractor, because he can deal with his own house problems. It's a really good method, in my opinion, if we get it right. And we are in a position now, we've got £7 million cost we're going to be facing now on this contract. Make certain we've got all the management in place. What? Oh, maybe not. I always thought it was 7 million. That's my personal view. It's not what the council's saying, Keith. So it's just I always said that right in the beginning, what we might be facing. In fact, I thought it was more than that, but there you go.
Yeah.
So I'll shut up now.
Does anyone else have any comments? Matthew?
In our recommendation, if we can build something in around sanctions, you know, what happens, key performance indicators, service level agreements, if they're missed, if they're not achieved, it's just a bit, I'm sure it's there, but from our recommendation, we're just saying, look, we want this bulletproof so that we all know if this happens, if this happens, if this happens, this is the consequences.
It was KPIs were mentioned in the discussion. That's why I latched onto it, saying we need to see those.
I'm absolutely sure it's in there, but our recommendation is we don't know it's in there because we haven't seen it. You're telling us it's in there, but you know, our recommendation is that this should be robust, it should be accountable, whatever words we can use, just so that we're really saying that this needs to be in there, please. Because if it's not, or if it's not to our satisfaction,
I think Keith is putting a few words together on that one.
Chairman, but I think there was that offer, the take-up of the offer to develop a councillor information pack, and that, you know, we can make sure that as part of your recommendation that includes the issue of sanctions and the KPIs that are available. I did wonder, there was some questioning around the portfolio holder working party and the fact that had ceased in October 2024, whether you wanted to urge the portfolio holder cabinet to reinstate that as part of looking at that data, to receive that data on a regular basis, and to effectively work with the portfolio holder to improve that situation and to look at the application of sanctions upon the contractor, whoever that is. If that's something that you want, then we can put that into the recommendation.
It seems to, because I'm still, as I say, it's well over a year since the working group had input, so the cabinet have in effect worked, in my view, in isolation over that period. So the working group having an input, I don't think is a bad thing.
So that's two, I think, recommendations, Chairman. I don't know whether there's any more.
Do we want to include, or are my thoughts on where it should be? Are people, are the figures where they expected them to be? Without mentioning figures. Yeah. So can we put that in some way?
Yeah, we know that that's...
I did mention it earlier, is that as soon as that decision is made public, the communication to our residents, is because it's crucial to everybody in this district, what we are doing and when we will be doing it. And I assume that's going to be done, but we've got, particularly with the change in glass collection and all this other stuff, we need to make certain they're fully aware in advance, not it's going to happen like 4 weeks for a council tax notice coming in April next year. This is what your service is going to be. People need to know. And need to know probably the benefits. There's some positives about that, about glass being collected. I often get asked, we probably all get asked, can we get collected glass at our door? Well, it's cool. I mean, this is a real positive for the council. So that communication will be a very positive thing to say to the residents. And this is what we're going to do once we know that decision and what that scope is. To get that out there and just remind them.
And I think in addition, as I mentioned before, if people make a mistake in the first few months, they're not people that are wrongdoers, they're making a mistake, and we need to assume that for the first period. I mean, not forever, but for the, it's a reasonable adjustment. I mean, particularly, I can think of some elderly residents, they're not going to change for a little while because it's habit. I do this, and that there needs to be a gentle reminder, not a sticker saying I'm not taking this or anything like that. It needs to be, there needs to be time for people to change their habits. Some people are creatures of habit, and we need to give them a little bit of time to adjust. Okay. New Champers, anything you want to add? Or no, that's fine.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah.
Jim, just to try and capture that then, so we've got one around around the light touch compliance approach in the early stages and allowing adjustments by residents should there be changes in respect of the collection arrangements for them. The re-establishment of the working party overseeing that implementation, access to all the data and the use of sanctions should poor performance be observed. That take-up of the offer of creation of a councillor information pack to yet further advise ward councillors of what information is available. That you're going to note that the figures in relation to the cost is broadly where the committee members considered it would be, and that I think there's a fifth one just around ensuring that there is good communications strategy implemented for residents, including in relation to changes such as the glass collection service. So.
Peter.
Thank you, Chair. Just a reminder that Jonathan Hamlet, he suggested that he was going to write in to confirm the penalties on termination of contracts as well from both sides. So reference and the circumstances, whether it was a breach of contract or a serious breach of sort of SLA, etc. So he said he was going to do that, so it's worth putting it down. Okay.
Else anyone like to add? Are we all happy with that? Okay, and then we've got the second part to look at, which is the outturn. I'm not sure what people's views are on that one. Peter.
Well, from my side, I'm going to write to the leader, asking him questions specifically about the 45,000 and circumstances around that role. So I'll do that, and I think you asked him to circulate the questions and his response to the rest of the committee.
Yeah, I'm happy that we do that. Is anyone else? Yeah, we can add that. And there was one around, Graham, you came up with about ring fencing.
Yep.
and that would be brought forward to the January meeting. Yeah, yeah, that would be. Case of just cut and paste and send them the same email, so it's quickly done. Yeah. Yeah.
I think we should be told.
I think that was the response to.
Find it yourself in the paperwork.
Yeah, well, we need to know.
I
This
think
big overspend across the road, we need to know because the spindles happened and didn't know who knew when and how. So if there's going to be £20 million spent over there and it comes to 40 million, I mean, let's face it, it never comes to what you ever. It might say 20 million quid, but it's always 25 or 30 million quid, isn't it? Always. It always overspends, and all these projects always do. So we need to know why and how.
Isn't that on the, sorry, that's on the, what, the library and all that?
Yeah, yeah.
But that's covered under the portfolio working party on the levelling up funds, isn't it? Because that's all levelling up funds.
I thought Carnarvon came under yourself, but obviously from a finance point of view, we're just saying.
Yeah. But I know it's always
if there's a potential overspend, can we be notified?
Yeah.
Rather than have to trawl through paperwork to find it.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's exactly right, Chairman. Those UK government funded schemes under LUF, LUP, CRP, CRP2, PIP, and any other acronyms you want to throw at it, that would technically fall within the community leadership overview and scrutiny committees. But what you're saying is, should there be any call on this council's finance arising out of any of those projects, then this committee wishes to be advised of that at the earliest opportunity. In fact, potentially ahead of any commitments being made to that effect. That's, I think, where you're trying to
because it may well appear on a cabinet briefing note, which wouldn't come to us. Yeah. What we're saying is, if something like a cabinet briefing note is coming out saying potential overspend, as a committee, we'd like to know about it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the overspend position. It could be an overspend, but funded within the LUF, LUP, CRP, CRP2. It's when it hits this council's funding. That's what I think you're getting at.
Maybe Richard might want to pipe in with this one. I mean, where we sit with that funding for over there, in terms of our exposure, obviously there is government, Essex and all other parties into this 20 million. Who controls the purse strings? Who's exposed if it goes over budget? And how we manage that? How do we play a part in that? Can you just sort of perhaps give me some sort of the way the practicalities work with that, where the funding comes in for that? Are we exposed to anything outside that if it goes over budget? Is this like a government thing that they pick it up under budget, or we've got to cut a corner on the project? Can you just give us perhaps some background without going into too much detail, so we understand that from a finance position? It's a really good point. I mean,
sort of most of the, as you'd expect, most of the funding streams that come from the government are, that's it, there's no more money. So as a accountable body, we manage that. So if there's any overspend, we pick it up. The government will only fund up to a certain limit. So it's not a partnership in that sense. its funding, and then it's about managing the project within that kind of overall cost, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I think there's loads of opportunities. From a personal view, there's loads of opportunities that come back to you anyway, but your recommendation is making it quite specific. There's no harm in that, is there? You're drawing that to Cabinet's attention. I think you'd get it via the processes anyway, but as I said, recommendation doesn't do any harm to ask for that specifically, does it? So that's reasonable position to take, yeah.
I think what you're saying, Richard, is right to agree, because there is a 20 million commitment. It is government funding. That's it. There's two ways it can be looked at if there's overspend. You can either cut back on part of the project to keep within the 20 million, or you can press on as planned and commit additional funding. So there's two choices how it can be dealt with. So I think it's a tricky one, because what we're saying is if there's going to be overspend, we need to know. But I think from Graham's committee, if the way to prevent overspend is to cut back on part of the project, Graham's committee needs to know about that so that they can look at, is that the correct thing to do? And I don't mean cut back, I mean what's being cut back or what's being looked at. Does that make sense?
Yep, and I think again from a milestone, I'm not suggesting you change where you are, but I think just to sort of for information is that with the waste contract, the most important stage of this is procurement, isn't it? You go to the market, you get a price back, that will culminate in a report going back to cabinet. So there's a choice there. The choice you've articulated there, that's the choice that we make at that cabinet decision as well. Has the tender come back over budget? And if it's over budget, what do we do about it? And you're right, do you value engineer it down, or do you actually consider putting additional funding in? That will be a point that will come back as part of that cabinet decision once that tenders come back in. So that happened anyway. So you'll see that and you'll have access to that. But then the ongoing position will be picked up as part of that kind of our normal financial monitoring sort of process as well. And again, it's your work program as well. As I said in the past, your work program, you can ask for that to come back as a specific item anyway. In addition to the normal kind of Q1, Q2 reports. So, that's in your gift to ask us to come back with more detail, both on the financial performance and the non-financial performance as well on all those sorts of projects. So that'd be absolutely fine going forward, yeah.
Initially, it wouldn't be ideas. Okay, so we've got some points on that then.
Yeah, and just again, that we've got the issue of questioning, particularly around the refugee use of the refugee resettlement grant, and also whether the position is the same in a range of neighbouring authorities. The investigation of ring fence funds, and that will come back to your January meeting when you're looking at the budget. And this issue of Carnarvon Terrace and any underspend that impacts on the council's funding, that you want that assurance that you'll be notified in advance.
Are we happy with that? Yep. Okay then, we've got those two pieces done. I know time is ticking, so we'll move quickly to the last item, which is around turn the pages over. The work programme. Now, I think pretty most of this is pretty straightforward. There's only one item that we briefly discussed, and that was around the working groups and how we wanted to handle those. So I know we spoke the other day about, because we've got low numbers on some of them, housing strategy, for example, do we want to try and pair them up in some way? So if there's a working group for housing and say, I don't know, asset management, do we want to do them both on the same evening with both groups there? So it gives a larger number. I mean, given for example, housing, it's me and Bernie. Well, once we spent an hour arguing with each other about it. Yeah, so I don't know how we want to handle those. Now, Mark did suggest we hold back a little bit on housing and maybe put the homelessness with it. I don't know. How would that affect the strategy coming through? Because that will be going to cabinet, won't it?
Yeah, I did think I don't think it impacts on the strategy. Just obviously is going to probably be more, if it's a task and finish group, that you're going to be looking across the adoption of the strategy and then its implementation. So it's just the work of that task and finish group will be impacted.
So has anyone any thoughts on how we can do these groups?
Jim, we're literally at half past, so you need to pass your resolution if you're going to continue, or may I suggest that you take that the committee authorises you and I, it's probably a me but in conjunction with you, but to determine the way forward for those task and finish groups, and then conclude the meeting.
Yeah, are you happy for Keith to tell me what to do?
Yep, that sounds good.
Yeah. Yeah, okay then, we're happy for that. So with that then, I will consult with Keith. If you've got any thoughts on it, email Keith and myself over the next, 3-4 days?
Yep.
Email us over the next 3 or 4 days. We'll take them in consideration, and then Keith will lay out a way forward so we can deal with those. Happy to move the rest of it as written?
Yep.
Yes.
Excellent. And I think that's the end of the meeting. So thanks for coming along this evening. We're just in on time, honest. And I wish you all a safe journey home.